Hi, I'm Dr. Evelyn. Welcome to my channel. I have here with me my producer and publisher, Melanie Davis. We're going to talk about leaving abuse.
Thank you for having me on again, Evelyn. This is really fun. I enjoy talking about these things with you, and you are just so inspirational. So I'm really glad that you're sharing your personal stories the way that you are. What made you realize that the situations you were in were abusive?
I had to really wake up because when I was in, especially my teenage relationship, I didn't want to continue to live in poverty. And not to be judgmental, but when you live in poverty, law enforcement is kind of a way of life. And I just did not want to continue to live my life that way. And
Law
I didn't want,
enforcement. Can you describe what that means for some people have no idea what you're talking about?
well, being involved, criminal things can happen, assaults and all kinds of things like that. And your mindset may not be good. You may begin to get involved in some criminal activity. I just didn't want that to be a way of life. And as I keep saying, I had a child that I had to raise and I wanted to protect him from that.
So were you looking at this relationship as your way out of a lifestyle that tended to be justice involved, law?
No, when I got into that relationship, that's when the legal problems happened
Okay.
because of the toxic environments that I was unfamiliar with.
See.
I was on my way to prison because of the activity and the environment and my behavior too. I'm transparent. I participated in some of it. That was the environment that I was in.
Mhm.
And if I had not chosen to remove my son and myself, I believe I would have ended up in prison. Well, I did get into trouble one time. It was a short stay, but I think I would have ended up a long time in the South Carolina Women's Correctional System.
And what role did the abuse you were suffering play in that to where leaving was the solution?
The abuse contributed to a lot of it. I mean, that on top of just living a toxic lifestyle, it was just toxic all the way around. Basically, nothing was positive. When you're in a situation like that, your thought patterns will begin to change. You may become a toxic person. And at one time, I became a toxic person because that was the life that I was living.
Um, Very vulnerable for you, very courageous of you to share that. But I think it's really important because there's probably a lot of people who are in very abusive situations that when you start to get in trouble like that, you may look at yourself in a way that isn't recognizing that it's your surroundings and the people influencing you versus who you are. Does that make sense?
That makes sense too. I can say that I probably was influenced, but like I keep saying, I myself chose to be involved in a situation like that because I was sheltered and I was naive at the time and I had no boundaries. So I really didn't know what was happening.
So, can you think of a specific moment, and it's okay if you can't, but a specific moment when you realized that you need to leave this relationship, even if you didn't know how to do it? Do you remember going through a process of kind of making the transition of recognizing to where you finally left?
It was the child knowing that I had responsibility
Hmm.
of another person that I wanted to give a chance at life. That was more important to me than being in that abusive relationship. I chose my child.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that living for others, service to others is often what compels us to do good things and things that we benefit from too. So, would you say that leaving an abusive relationship is often much harder than people realize?
I believe leaving an abusive relationship is very difficult. But like I keep saying, as an advocate, we don't want to judge anybody because we don't know their circumstances. I like to stress that because of the chance of people judging others, not knowing the whole situation. But being that I was in poverty and I had another mouth to feed, it was very difficult. And I had a second child. I thought that I would never be able to remove myself from that situation. It was difficult.
Well, that was my next question. Can you describe what leaving actually looked like for you? How did you make it happen?
Be honest, I believe it really took me 2 years to leave that teenage abusive relationship, and I had to call law enforcement constantly, just on a regular basis to try to protect myself or have some records of what was happening, and that's the only way I was able to get out. I just had to keep calling law enforcement, and I had to set a boundary, and I had to make up my mind to say, "No, no, no. I do not want this life, my life to be this way. I don't want it." I had to stop being naive and set a strong boundary.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it does take time. It's a kind of a maturity, you could almost say, process, or definitely a process of becoming more informed, like you said, to kind
Yes.
of be able to recognize the situation that you're in and see the way through is not instantaneous. And I think that's where anyone who's not in an abusive relationship, or maybe even somebody who is in an abusive relationship, but they don't realize just how complex it can be because your mind is so manipulated.
Was very immature. Like I said, because I got into that situation at such an early age, I was not on the level of my peers. I thought that I was on the level of my peers, but I believe that abusive relationship interfered with me developing. It
Yeah,
interfered with that because those years were very crucial. And I was in just going through all types of traumatic things. So it had a lot to do with me not being developed correctly or
yeah,
in a healthy manner.
yeah. So with that being a part of your evolution, the slowing of it in a sense, after you left, what kinds of challenges did you continue to face?
The next steps, I started dating, but I never truly trusted anyone. I became very cautious. I'm cautious now. I'm a cautious individual. Those relationships interfered with me trusting others.
Yeah. And sometimes you need to trust people, right? Because we all
Yes,
need each other. It takes a community sometimes just to
it does.
stay alive. We need to serve each other. So not being able to trust, I'm sure that isolated you in other ways that made your life harder. While at the same time, when you know that your picker, wasn't very good in the first place, it's like, okay, I don't trust my own judgment, and there's some valid reasons for that. So did you go to therapy? And if so, how did therapy help you understand what you went through? Like, what point did you start to kind of get that knowledge, that wisdom that you'd been lacking?
I was divorced and the custody battle ensued. I was ordered to go get some type of counseling, and I went to a shelter and had some counseling sessions. And that's when I was first introduced to counseling. And I thought it was awesome.
You did. So you
Yeah, I
recommend it?
did. The court, I feel like they were fishing for something that was not there. So they gave me a court order and ordered me to go to counseling. And I want to say this sarcastically. That's one of the best things that's ever happened in my life.
Wow.
That court order.
Yeah, and I know we're in a future episode coming up, we're going to dive more into family court and its corruption and how it abused you, which is like mind blowing.
Yes.
But to hear you say that, I think it speaks to something very spiritual, which is that the worst situation that you went through, which was just the gauntlet of family court actually brought about some of the best things, which is the counseling. That's remarkable. I was actually not expecting you to say that, and I think it's very profound. Yeah, knowing because I know your story because I published your book, so I'm very familiar with your story and the things that you went through when you went through court, and they were never on your side, and they were highly abusive. And like you said, they're fishing, but in the course of fishing, you ended up getting the help that you really needed. Do you think that, and I guess this is just a purely hypothetical question, but do you think that you would have ever gotten, at some point, maybe you would have got therapy, but what do you think it would have taken if that hadn't happened for you to get that assistance that made such a difference in your life?
Did go and speak with someone when I was still married. I had forgotten about that, but I wasn't really telling the whole truth when I did that because of the marriage, it was so much I felt so much pressure on me, but I don't really think that I would have gone to therapy and taken it very seriously like I did because actually my life was on the line and I wanted to be a better person and I wanted to learn myself. So I was honest and I went and sought help through that court order and it was awesome.
Would you like to talk a little bit more about the therapy, maybe some of the things that you feel helped you the most, and maybe give some advice to the listeners that are kind of vacillating and trying to decide if it's something they need? I think a lot of times, unless we're forced into it, like you were, sometimes we don't do the things we need to for ourselves, you know?
Right.
So if you could give the listeners that encouragement to help them go and do the things that maybe they're putting off or just not sure about, you know what I mean?
Yes. I just felt like I was kinda like that little girl that was trapped inside of a woman's body because I had some things that had happened that I carried around for many years, and I never spoke of those things because in my culture, you are taught not to talk about certain things, and I did not talk about things that caused me to be traumatized and things that contributed to me making some of the bad decisions.
That's really key. I think it is in our culture by and large that we don't talk about. More and more, I think we're starting to see people talk through social media, you know? I think we're seeing a lot of that actually. I think that people take to social media. Not sure that's the healthiest outlet.
Not some of the
You know, I think that we tend to get more fighting and more contention out
Yes,
of that than actual healing. I'm not sure that's a healing.
and
Oh
smear
yeah.
campaigns and stuff
Yeah.
like that. That is not really what social media is for, I don't think,
No,
but I
but
don't know.
yeah, I think it's safe to say that people look at it like some kind of therapy or of maybe just getting the final word in. I think we see
Yes,
a lot of that, and of course, our I won't name any names, but you get influencers of all sorts that take to social media, and use it to make their point, and it becomes very contentious. So,
yes,
whereas going to someone who is trained to de-escalate those emotions and to help people be rational, realistic, grounded, heal, forgive.
yes.
How much do you see forgiveness being blasted in social media? It happens occasionally and it's wonderful when it does, but I think the things that a therapist is going to do for you is not what you're going to get out of avoiding those environments of conversation.
I walk in forgiveness to all of my oppressors and the system, all of the people that tried to hurt me. I forgive them because without them, I wouldn't be here right now.
And you do call your abusers your footstools, which we talked about in the
I
last
do.
episode. And for
Yes.
anyone who might be just joining us for this one and haven't seen the previous one, would you just give a brief description of why you use the term footstool?
I use the term footstool throughout the book and in my vocabulary because the people that have abused me, I just consider them as being a footstool because without them, I wouldn't be on this platform. I had to allow my mind to be changed and use those negative experiences in a positive manner,
I love it.
in a
They
positive way.
they
And
just
that's
help
what's happening.
they helped you rise up. And they helped you step
Help
up.
me rise up
And
and to be able to
I don't know if there's anything that better exemplifies your perspective, your attitude than the term that you use to refer to the people who've abused you as footstools. I think that's amazing. Well, we are hitting the end of our time on this topic. And in the next episode, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about healing. So, talked about leaving, seeking therapy. We're going to dive a lot more into the healing. I think what we're ending on a great segue for that. Now that we see just how forgiving and positive you are, I want to learn more about the healing that you went through to get to the point that you're at right now.
thank you.